3, 2, 1. You are live, it says. Um, I want to read a little something. Okay, it just completely disappeared. Let's try that again. I want to read a little something from Yechezkel. That's Ezekiel, and in case you don't know, it's chapter 1, verse 4. It says, Ve'ere vehine ruach se'ara ba'a min ha'zefon anon gadol ve'esh mitla kachat venoga lo saviv umi tocha ke'ein ha-chashmal mitoch ha'esh. And then reading further, I want to read from Shemot, also known as Exodus, chapter 20, verse 18. V'chol ha'am roim et ha'kolet ve'et ha'lapidim ve'et kol ha'shofar ve'et ha'har ashen vayar ha'am vayanu vayamdu merachok. Hag Sameach, Shavuot. Well, I'm going to spare you some of the things that I usually, those silly questions I ask every year at Shavuot, since you've heard them so many times, you probably don't want to hear them again. I know I don't want to hear them again. But reading from Shemot 19, 1 through 20, this is kind of a halfway my translation. It's just my tweaking more of the King Jimmy than it is anything else, or maybe not King Jimmy. I don't know where I got it. I don't remember. It's been so many years ago. But basically in English it says, in the third month, when the children of Yisrael were gone forth out of the land of Mitzrayim, so that's when the children of Israel left Egypt, the same day, that third month, the same day came they into the wilderness of Sinai. Now, in America they say Sinai. Some do in Israel as well. But anywho, they wound up at Sinai. For they were departed from Rephidim and were come to the desert of Sinai and had pitched in the wilderness, and there Yisrael camped before the mount. And Moshe went up to God, and Yahweh called to him out of the mountain, saying, Thus shall you say to the house of Yaakov, and tell the children of Israel. Anyway, you have seen what I did to the Mitzrayim, to the Egyptians, and how I bare you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. You've seen it. You lived it. You walked across on dry land. You shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words which you shall speak to the children of Israel. And Moshe came and called for the elders of the people, and laid before their faces all these words which Yahweh commanded him. And all the people answered together and said, All that Yahweh has spoken, we will make it happen. That's really a better translation. They usually say, we will do. I don't know, maybe it seemed poetic-y to whoever translated it, but what they said was, we will make it happen. We'll find a way. You saw the horn I was going to blow tonight if I couldn't get one, the one I needed. And Moshe returned the words of the people to Yahweh, as if he didn't know. And Yahweh said to Moshe, Behold, I come to you in a thick cloud. I'm going to show up in a thick cloud, that the people may hear when I speak with you and believe you forever. And wow, it's been over 3,000 years ago, and we still believe it. I'm just saying, just throwing that out there. God probably knew what he was talking about. Thick cloud, the people hear and believe in you forever. And Moshe told the words of the people to Yahweh. And Yahweh said to Moshe, Go to the people and sanctify them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their clothes. And be ready against the third day, for on the third day Yahweh will come down in the sight of the people upon Mount Sinai, and you shall set boundaries for the people round about, saying, take heed to yourselves that you do not go up into the mountain or touch the border of it. Whoever touches the mountain shall be surely put to death. Why? Well, because they weren't pure enough. I mean, they washed their clothes and they washed their body. Yeah, they did that. But the covenant hadn't been entered into, the sanctification, the sacrifice had not been made. They were not pure enough to be anywhere near God. And apparently, death by stoning or stabbing was better than what they were going to get if they walked up there. Just throwing that out there. He went on, there shall not be a hand touch it, but he shall surely be stoned or shot through. That means to be stabbed. Whether it be beast or man, it shall not live. When the trumpet sounds long, they shall come up to the mountain. And Moshe went down from the mount and rather to the people and sanctified the people, and they washed their clothes. And he said to the people, be ready against the third day. Don't go near your wives. And it came to pass on the third day in the morning that there were thunderings and lightnings and a thick cloud on the mountain. Imagine that. And the voice of the trumpet exceedingly loud, so that all the people that was in the camp trembled. And Moshe brought forth the people out of the camp to meet with God. And they stood at the nether part of the mountain, the far edge of it, and Mount Sinai was altogether covered in smoke, because Yahweh descended upon it in fire. And the smoke ascended as the smoke of a furnace, and the whole mountain quaked greatly. And when the voice of the trumpet sounded long and waxed louder and louder, Moshe spoke, and God answered him by a voice. This was audible, everybody heard it. And Yahweh came down upon Mount Sinai on the top of the mountain, and Yahweh called Moshe up to the top of the mountain, and Moshe went up. Man, it's a scene that we can't even begin to wrap our heads around. Can't even begin to. We can't begin to understand how loud it was, how terrifying it would have been for a people like that. I mean, nowadays, because of movies and all the things that the illusions that can be made, it might not be so terrifying. But back then, wow, this is way before CGI. You know, for one thing, they would have known it was real and not just being faked somehow. Uh, so in Shemot 2018, a very fairly literal translation, all the people saw the thunderings and the lightnings and the noise of the trumpet and the mountain smoking. And when all the people saw it, they removed and stood afar off, right? We just read that. Now consider that same verse translated in a slightly different way, one that is intended for you to understand what was actually said in Hebrew, but you're going to understand it in English instead. And in his presence and in the joy of his light, all the people's eyes lingered on the sight of the thunderous voice, and the dancing flames of fire, and the thunderous voice of the trumpet, and the mountain smoking. And when all the people's eyes lingered on it a while, standing in his presence and in the joy of his light, they ran to and fro in sheer terror and resisted it, thrusting themselves far away. It's a better explanation. I want to move on to a little bit further down this thing, because there's a bunch of things I don't think that are all that important to talk about. The Torah was given at Sinai 50 days, 50 days after first fruits. After the Yehudim were released from captivity in Mitzrayim, and it was written on stone tablets. Then the Torah, if of course you believe the events of the first century, was given 50 days after first fruits in the Heichal, the temple area. But from that time on, it was placed on the mind and the heart. Again, if you believe that, I do. I believe it actually happened. When God first moved into the secret place, which was called the Kodesh HaKodeshim, in the Ohel, which is the Hebrew word for tent, and eventually the Heichal, again the temple, his presence was experienced by precious few. And just as a side note, to tie back to something I said this morning, and just speaking with my wife about this morning's message on self-reflection and tying it into Shavuot like I did, because I think that self-reflection is a very important thing on Shavuot. I think that we're celebrating the giving of the Torah, and there is no greater gift that God has ever given his people. Maybe life, children, I don't know. It's a great gift. Let's just say it is the instruction manual for living. So I don't know how you can get any better than that. But the thing that stuck out to me in this morning's message was the fact that, Torah changed my life. It changed everything about me. It changed the way I walk, the way I talk, the way I think, the way I speak, the way I approach life in every way, shape, and form. It absolutely translated me from being dumber than a mud fence in a rainforest to the legitimate, well-educated scholar rabbi that teaches on this little podcast every Saturday. And so I'm a big believer in that. I'm a big believer in, boy, the Torah can just change your life, blah, 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 yak, yak, yak. But the thing that stood out to me in my study for this message, the thing that was an absolute epiphany for me, was that not everybody is me. Just because this worked for me does not mean it will work for you. In fact, it's most likely that it won't. That's what I figured out. Because what I really and I know I said it, but I don't think I got the point across very well because I didn't punctuate it. I meant to. I just saw something shiny and forgot. But whatever it is that is your passion in life, if it's farming, you take the Torah and you build everything you know and do about farming according to the boundaries that are built around that. And don't step outside of that, because that can be a very dangerous place. Death can come stepping outside of that. But we stay within the boundaries of God's law. And whatever that thing is that drives you, you can do that so long as you stay within the boundaries of God's law. In my case, it just happened to be God's law. That's what my passion in life was. So I was kind of single-minded on that, I think. And this developing this, self-reflection thing made me realize that whatever it is in your life that is your passion, whatever that is, so long as it's not illegal or, immoral or something like that, whatever it is, as long as you do that well within the bounds of Torah, you're going to succeed. Things are going to be great. God is going to bless you and all that you care about. Are there going to be hard times? Is it going to be hard work? Yes and yes. Is the resistance going to resist you every step of the way? Yes and amen. that's going to happen with or without God. That doesn't have anything to do with it. That's how God created things. For every good, there's a bad. For every up, there's a down. For every forward, there's a reverse. But I hope that you guys got that. That these things that you're so passionate about and these things that you so much want to do, you just wrap them up inside the boundaries of the Torah. And you can expect that God's going to bless you in what you do and that you are well within the will of God. You don't have to go around looking for, well, what's my calling? What's God wanting me to do? No, you've already figured it out because your calling is within you. That was one humdinger of a thing. So, but God's presence was experienced by precious few. When the fire came down on Shavuot, and we're talking the Second Temple period, it hadn't come down in hundreds and hundreds of years, about somewhere between 400 and 600 years. I don't know off the top of my head, but somewhere in that range. And people were shocked. And besides, it came down in the wrong place. What's it doing over there? It's usually over there. So they were a little confused by that. But it came down, and there's more than just the New Testament that witnesses to that. Even Josephus said that. Just saying, just throwing that out there, and he's not the only one. There's several extra biblical accounts of the fire coming down on that very day, but not since. Anyway, when the fire came down on that Shavuot, the presence of God sat down on the mercy seat of the tongue. Because remember, it said it was dancing on their tongue, according to the New Testament story. Because the Torah was written deep inside the secret place in their hearts, and now ours. You see, they were trained in Torah. They were ready to go out and reach the rest of the Yehudi world, the Jewish world, with the good news that our God reigns. Because that's how Hosea said that when God reinstated his covenant, that's what people would say, our God reigns. That's where that comes from. Which, of course, this gospel, if you will, hopefully, means that God has restored his covenant with his people, and that means we have to live according to his law. At any rate, the Torah is not written on our hearts and minds through the process of osmosis. It doesn't just ooze into our heads. Well, kind of does. or by some secret knowledge given to us by the infilling of the third person of the pagan Trinity. God's law is written on our hearts and minds after we have learned it and have come to love it enough to live out our lives according to it. Whatever it is that we do in our lives, according to the Torah. And you know what that does? It gives you the access, a face-to-face access to God that precious few, only precious few, used to experience. Will you feel his breath on your face? I tell you what, you'll pass out if you do. But it would be cool, and it'd be worth it. You may roll around the floor like a Pentecostal if he does, but it'd be worth it. I don't know. There was one time in my life while I was in yeshiva and was praying one day, and I swear to you, I felt God put his hands on both sides of my face and pull me forward and say, Ohavi, I think. It's been so long, and I've had the stroke since then. I don't remember for sure, but it was something along those lines. I'm pretty sure that's what he said. I I don't remember what happened. I may have blacked out for a while. I'm just saying it was an incredible experience, and maybe I just worked myself up into a frenzy, and it was all just physical. I don't think it was. I didn't feel like I was in a frenzy at the time, but maybe it wasn't. Maybe I really did feel the hand of God on my face. I don't think it's beyond possibility. And I think that if we'll live out our lives according to God's law, within the boundaries of God's law, whether it's, uh, you're running an environmental uh, testing company, or you're a programmer and you got a little farm off to the side, or you're a counselor helping people get the help that they need. Who else am I leaving out? You guys get it. I'm just, the things that those of you who are listening right now do. As long as you do those within the boundaries of God's law, I don't think it would be out of the question to feel God's presence, because it is definitely, definitely there. Those who are touched by the fiery passion of God's Torah are changed forever. As the fiery passion touched the 120 who were there that day in the second temple, they spoke proper words arranged in a very specific order, not because God was dictating what they should say, but because they were fully trained rabbin, which is plural of rabbi. And it was time to spread the good news of the gospel. And they preached that good news of the gospel. And the gospel was like a fiery passion dancing on their tongues. So does that mean that the fire is going to dance on your tongue? No. That means that you're going to experience times when you talk to somebody about the Torah that's going to give you chills and goosebumps. And that's the fiery passion dancing on your tongue. And the person listening to it is going to experience it as well. That's them feeling the fiery passion as they spoke these well-placed words. You've probably already experienced it. That's what happened. The Feast of Shavuot has always been a celebration of the giving of the Torah. Aren't you glad God gave us the Torah? The only difference between this Shavuot, the Second Temple Shavuot, and those that went before it is that this particular Shavuot gave the fiery passion of God's Torah to all flesh, not just the Yehudim. Now, what do I mean by that? Can the Christians have it? Not if they're Christians. Can the Muslims have it? Not if they're Muslim. You have to follow God's law. And if you're a follower of God's law, that makes you Yehudi. Do you hear it? Yeah, that is short for Yahweh. Hud, imitator. Imitator of Yahweh. That means you live according to the Torah. So if you do that, that makes you Yehudi. That's where we get the word Jew. That makes you a Jew. Torah observance, full blown, living it out, knowing you're never turning back, that makes you a Jew. If we love God with all our heart, soul, and strength, we will not serve other gods. We will not have graven images. We will not take his name in vain. We will remember to keep the Sabbath day very, very holy. We will honor our father and mother. We will not commit murder. We will not commit adultery. We will not steal things. We will not bear false witness. We will not covet our neighbor's house and his other stuff. If we see our neighbor in need, we will help him, even if it means we have to pull a big old ox out of a really deep ditch. Why? Because we are filled with God's passion. And that's what his Torah has always done to those who are filled with it. And I guess that's why this has hit me so hard, this reflection thing and this figuring out that the Torah is the boundaries to your passion. You're filled with God's passion in your whole life and everything that you do, if you do it according to the Torah. And now, because Mashiach has restored God's covenant to the Yehudim, the non-Yehudim can convert to Judaism, which they always could have done. And once they get through their training, they too can experience that passion that only precious few could experience before. They too will find the passion of God dancing on their tongues. Have you accepted the fiery passion of God? If not, will you accept it? Will you let God fill you with His holy Torah? If so, climb into your prayer closet tonight. Let God know how you feel and experience the fiery passion of God. Shalom v'shalom, y'all. I don't remember what I'm supposed to do.